there's healthcare providers out there sharing, you know, facts and medicine, and it's just so hard to feel like no one's listening to you.
Okay, so we heard from two women who went out of state to get abortions because their pregnancies, which weren't viable, were also threatening to their health. They're part of a lawsuit against the state who wants to, and they want to add abortion laws. They want our abortion laws, I should say, to add the health of the mother as an exception to those laws. What about the doctors, though? They say since the bans went into effect, Idaho's reproductive health care system has spiraled into crisis, and it's only going to get worse. Medicine is not a black and white thing, and they argue you can't legislate it either. Once again, here's Morgan Romero.
In rural Idaho, practicing family medicine brings unique challenges and burdens.
It's a wonderful job, but it already was exhausting and challenging, and now, you know, especially with the women's health piece, it's gotten even worse.
Soon after the U.S. Supreme Court handed abortion regulations back to the states through the Dobbs decision, Idaho's 2 abortion bans took effect.
What kind of issues have arisen since Dobbs?
Well, everything we do now, we often have to tiptoe around very carefully. Yeah, so it's been a wonderful career.
Dr. Julie Lyons, a family medicine physician in Blaine County, dedicates half her practice to women's health care and obstetrics.
Pre-Dobbs, if a patient did need a health-saving abortion or an abortion for a fatal diagnosis, we were able to provide that in the state of Idaho. That often happened in consultation with our perinatologists, and could be offered that day or the next day.
Today, Lyons says the way they discuss care has changed.
It really turns this happy visit into something, a lot more nuanced and a lot more challenging.
For 2 years, conversations have shifted more to what happens if the woman has an emergency or chooses to go out of state for a surgical abortion or induction of labor. Doctors are also talking to patients about getting life flight insurance.
Instead of talking about the happy moments and vitamins and nutrition and getting enough sleep, now I'm counseling women about what would happen if your baby has a fatal fetal diagnosis or if you develop a health risk.
Now, doctors face threats of losing their medical license, thousands of dollars in fines, and prison time if they perform an illegal abortion.
And that is cast this huge web of uncertainty.
Because they say they struggle to navigate the exceptions to Idaho's abortion bans, doctors now have to call their health system's attorneys when the recommended treatment is abortion.
How does a doctor decide, and maybe they can't, the long-term health impacts versus the life of the mother? How does one decide that in that moment?
Yeah, I think that's the inherent controversy, really, is that every patient has their own unique story, and the law does not allow us to discern that or advocate for that unique story.
Doctors say some patients aren't getting the care they need.
Abortion is health care. It's often the #1 treatment for some pregnancy conditions, and making that access so impaired really puts people at risk.
To get clarity on the laws, Dr. Lyons, along with a Boise-based OBGYN, the Idaho Academy of Family Physicians, and 4 Idaho women, filed a lawsuit against the state, governor, attorney general, and board of medicine.
We're asking our state to maybe take their hands off some of the gags and restrictions that have been placed on us as physicians.
Specifically, so they can use their good faith medical judgment to provide abortions for women who face health risks and whose babies aren't expected to make it to term or survive for long outside the womb. In this newsletter published in early May, Attorney General Raul Labrador wrote he's made clear in court, quote, if a doctor believes in good faith that the termination of a woman's pregnancy is necessary to save her life, regardless of how imminent that risk is, Idaho law allows it.
And the Attorney General, for example, has said that the law is very clear. The law is very clear. Doctors can still practice. What would you say to that?
That boils my blood, honestly. None of us want to wait until a patient is too sick. How are you supposed to determine when the right time to trigger that care is?
In a post-Dobbs Idaho, dozens of OBGYNs and maternal fetal medicine specialists left the state or stopped practicing. A report from the Idaho Physician Wellbeing Action Collaborative shows we lost 22% of our obstetricians between August of 2022 and November of 23. And more than half of the state's maternal fetal medicine specialists, or MFMs, left Idaho. The report doesn't outline exactly why they all left, but the two I spoke with blame Idaho's laws.
This was 100% the abortion ban that influenced our decision to leave.
There's that fear that somebody could question your decision in that moment.
Doctors Lauren Miller and Kylie Cooper stuck around for several months after the bans took effect.
The laws are vague, which is really hard because medicine is very gray. So trying to apply a new kind of legal definition to the way that we care for patients is just really quite impossible to do.
Miller and Cooper tried working with legislators and leaders to change the laws to allow for abortions when the mother's health is at risk, not just her life.
But until somebody is actively dying in front of you, right, meaning you're coding them, you're doing compressions, you're giving them pressors, you're doing the things to actually sustain their blood pressure in their body, you don't actually know that they're 100% going to die. And that's that gray zone that's impossible to navigate.
They didn't feel elected officials heard them.
It feels like an attack on who we are and on our education and how much experience and time that we've already given to healthcare and to caring for patients, the years of training. It feels like a lack of trust from those around us.
They say they ultimately left to protect their families, careers, and lives.
It's just a wrenching experience that I have to act to protect my patient's health. And I know myself well enough that I could not sit by and watch a patient getting sicker and getting sicker and getting sicker and not act. Like I stayed in Idaho, I knew that I would potentially commit a crime.
That's been kind of a weight lifted. It's to be able to just go back to caring for people in the way that I'm, supposed to be able to care for people. But I also feel, a lot of guilt about leaving. It was a very difficult decision. We were very happy and settled. Leaving, is one less obstetrical provider in a state that already is struggling with, having access to healthcare and maternal care deserts, and how that was going to further impact things.
Those that remain, it increases our burden of the number of patients we have to see and treat and triage, and I think it potentially could ignite a collapse of our healthcare system.
Dr. Lyons trains medical students as part of the University of Washington's Idaho program, and she sees firsthand how the state is struggling to recruit doctors and medical residents, particularly in rural Idaho.
Our residents are no longer getting the type of training that they need, even to manage a high-risk miscarriage situation that might come into a rural emergency room.
I can't imagine choosing to move somewhere where you can't practice medicine in the way that you were trained to do.
With the current laws on the books, doctors say the weight of their burdens will lead to more burnout.
I imagine we will have a very barren medical landscape here,
impacting women's health care as a whole.
I imagine that mental health as well as physical health in women will decline. I imagine, a very bleak future if we don't change this. I would just ask our lawmakers to really sit down and talk with more doctors. We are the people taking care of Idahoans.
Dr. Lyons is taking a year-long sabbatical to consider whether she still wants to deliver babies in Idaho. She says she's worried about raising her kids safely if she keeps practicing in this state. There's an active effort to get abortion access on the ballot in 2026 to let Idaho voters decide what our laws should look like. Nonprofit Idahoans United for Women and Families Coalition hasn't filed their ballot language yet, but the group expects to in the coming months, and then they'll go around with a petition and start gathering signatures to then try to get it on the ballot, Brian.
That's interesting. A lot of people we've been hearing from say they want that option to give it to the people, so we'll see what happens with that. Interesting part of that, this desert.
Yeah.
This female healthcare desert that's being created by people leaving the state.
Yeah, they talk about maternal care deserts, and this is an issue all over America. It's a problem everywhere, but it's particularly exacerbated. Studies are showing by abortion bans, but prior to the abortion bans going into effect, a 2022 report showed about a third of Idaho counties were considered these deserts, and what that means is they lacked maternity resources, they didn't have hospitals or birth centers, and they had no obstetric providers in their areas.
The doctor I spoke with at St. Luke's, I asked him why he hasn't left yet. He said he thinks about it every day, but he says he knows these women in Idaho need health care, and that's why he stays. All right, thanks, Morgan.
You bet.
We're right back.